real quick. I just fired up the live broadcast I try to broadcast every day the first segment of the show. I don't always do it, but I would say 90% of the time we have the live broadcast either on our website newsradio1029.com, either there at our at our YouTube page or on Twitter. But I just got notification literally as I was logging in today that Twitter is no longer allowing that for free, and that you have to have a Twitter or an X premium account. So for some reason, that's not up and running. So I apologize if you're used to seeing that and you can't see it today. I'm going to try and figure that out during the break. I had never seen that error before. It just popped up literally as I was getting ready to go on the air here. So we'll have to do a little bit of digging into that and find out what's going on there. But apparently you have to have an X premium account now in order to stream live. They're not letting us do it for free anymore. So as we get into the show today, of course, as there always is, there's plenty to talk about, lot to get to today. I've got one of those "they would never do that" stories, a story out of Austin, Texas. The city of Austin attempted to cut a man's lawn. According to the article from NBC News, it says an attempt by Austin, Texas officials to serve a search warrant and provide lawn care resulted in shots fired, an hour-long standoff, a house fire, and a death, according to police in Austin, Texas. So we'll get into that. Essentially, the story, as I understand it, is some guy in Austin, Texas was not keeping up with keeping his lawn cut and manicured in an appropriate way. So code enforcement people showed up and said, you got to cut the lawn. He didn't cut the lawn. So code enforcement people showed up with a search warrant, which resulted in the man shooting at the people who came to mow his lawn, and then a hours-long standoff in which the man started his house on fire and stepped out through the garage and ended up being killed by police. So it's one of those stories. I want to be careful not to defend this guy for shooting at innocent contractors trying to mow his lawn. I don't want to defend him in his inappropriate behavior and engaging with a standoff, but this is one of those stories where it really feels like, boy, something could have been handled a little bit differently, right? In the interest of community safety, in the interest of keeping, raccoons and rats at bay, maybe we have to kill this guy in his front lawn because he refused to mow it. It seems like there's maybe a better way to handle this whole situation. And I think it's more proof that policing just needs to be reevaluated. The whole approach to modern policing, whether it's serving search warrants, whether it's dealing with SWAT issues or whatever, the entire thing needs to be reevaluated. And I say this because I have friends who are police officers, and I don't want them showing up at a simple code enforcement situation where a guy's just not taking care of his lawn and ending up in a shootout and potentially getting killed by someone having some sort of mental breakdown or massive mental health issue. I have friends that are police officers, and as much as they do, I would like to see them make it home at the end of the day. And so something about these sorts of things needs to be reevaluated. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've got all the answers and that I can wave a magic wand and make this kind of thing never happen again. But it comes back to the story that I've shared several times, right? You get a speeding ticket for 10 or 15 miles an hour over the speed limit or whatever. You don't pay it. It becomes a warrant. There's now a bench warrant for you. You refuse to to comply with the terms of the bench warrant. You don't turn yourself in. Eventually, cops show up at your house. You refuse to come out. I'm not going to jail over a $15 or a 15-mile-an-hour speed ticket or a seatbelt ticket or some other, minor infraction. You end up in a quote-unquote standoff because now SWAT has showed up at your house. They eventually decide we are going to force you into compliance, and they kick the door in. They launch gas through the front window, whatever it is that they do. You decide to continue to resist, and you end up dead, shot in front of your family on the front lawn over a simple traffic infraction. Now, the likelihood of that happening is very, very low. I get it. But as this situation clearly proves, the likelihood is not zero. The possibility is not non-existent. And many of you have texted in and called into the show as we've had these conversations, say, well, that kind of thing doesn't happen. No cop would ever do that. Well, through a series of tragically unfortunate events, shout out to Lemony Snicket, this guy's dead because he wouldn't mow his lawn. Now, again, I'm not saying the police didn't have the right to shoot him because he came out of a burning house that he had set on fire himself, and he was armed and clearly a threat to police. So I'm not saying that they didn't have the right to shoot this guy. I mean, in the end, they have to protect themselves. They have every right to protect themselves from harm as much as you or I do. But over a guy not mowing his lawn, he's now dead. A grandfather, an uncle, a brother, a cousin, a whatever he was to a lot of other people, is now dead over code enforcement about the length of the grass in his front yard. Police officers could have ended up dead. Innocent lawn mowing contractors could have ended up dead. And so I think it really is time to start reevaluating the way we handle policing in general. And I've talked about this at great length, and I don't know if it's even possible. But the idea and the concept of community policing, I think, needs to be reconsidered. And I know that we don't live in Mayberry and things like that, but that approach to policing, where the local police know the local members of the community in at least some way. Maybe you don't know everybody on your beat in person and by name, and you don't know what's going on with their kids and whether or not their soccer team won the tournament that weekend, or their son's football team or their daughter's softball team won the state championship or whatever. But a more community-focused approach to policing, I think is where we need to go with this. And I've talked about this, the problems going back in the 1930s Germany that helped lead to the rise of Hitler. There was an abandonment of local policing, of community policing, and a shift towards federal or centralized policing. Now, we're not quite to where federal police are roaming the streets in our local communities, but certainly policing is becoming more and more centralized. And I think there's some significant problems, because not only does it put citizens at risk, but it puts the police officers themselves at risk. And like I said, I know these guys. I know a lot of them. And I think most of them, the last thing they want to do when they get up in the morning and they put on that uniform and strap on the belt with the cuffs and the taser and the handgun and all that, the last thing they want to do is end up killing a guy in his front yard because his grass was too long. I really doubt that. I mean, maybe there's some psychopath on a police department somewhere, but I really doubt that there are many, if any, cops at all that think, gosh, I hope I get to go to a code enforcement where a guy didn't mow his lawn and we get to, shoot him in his front yard. I doubt that that's happening. But nonetheless, here we are. News story out of Austin, Texas, man killed when the city attempted to cut his lawn. There's that. There's a whole lot more. We'll talk about some of the protests in D.C. We'll talk about a potential donation scandal to the Harris campaign popping up, and a whole lot more right here on News Radio 1029 KARN.